book review on video. This time, The Lost Memoirs of Jane Austen by Syrie James. I gotta say first of all that I am a Jane Austen fan. Massive Jane Austen fan. I've read most of what she wrote. I read lots of various sequels, Pride and Prejudice sequels, Sense and Sensibility, books supposed to be about Austen or by Austen, whatever. And I gotta say that this is a book for my compatriots, people who are already big fans of Jane Austen. If you're not a fan of Austen, and if you've read nothing that she wrote, then do not bother with this book, because this will not be worth your time. It's overall an okay read, but fails to convince me completely. It's supposed to be the memoirs of Miss Austen, supposedly a collection of letters and various writings, extracts from this collection, found in a chest that was like shut in a fake cupboard or something in a house where she lived. And obviously in this author insights and stuff, they don't make a pretense of it being anything other than fiction, but the actual part of the book that is the novel, that does make that pretense. And I gotta say, it fails 100%. Because this is supposed to be basically Austen looking back over a certain period of her life, primarily the period following her father's death. After they had lived in Bath for a few years, I think he died in 1805, and they were left pretty much penniless and had to rely on her brothers. She had 6 brothers, I think, and her mother and her sister had to move around, be provided for by the brothers. So it was a difficult time, but more difficult than any of us could ever have guessed. For love found Miss Austen in that hard period of her life, supposedly. But I don't for a second buy any of this. Primarily because this author, she falls in the same trap that almost every single person who attempts to write a real diary, a real journal, a real novel in letters, falls into. They use direct speech. So much direct speech. Long reams of direct speech. And when she's writing this, like 5 years after the fact, first of all, she's not going to remember long speeches made by herself or anyone else said to her, whatever. She's not going to remember that. Even if she did want to make it seem as if she remembered, she wouldn't. No one would write in that style. It's just not convincing for a second. And something that really bugs me when it comes to novels that are supposed to be genuine journals that have been discovered or whatever, it's that they always fall into this trap. They always just pile it on with direct speech, and it's never convincing. Because if you write in your diary, I mean, I keep a diary, and I may relate conversations that I've had in my journal, but certainly I never write my lines. I said blah blah blah, he said, because that is totally unnatural. That is not the way the human mind works. But people do it all the time, and Syrie James has done it, and this book is totally unconvincing as a result. She also isn't very good at recreating the language of the Regency period. There's nowhere near enough commas, and she uses words like at one point, this would be in what, 1807, I think, and she writes that Mr. Ashford professed himself to be an immediate fan of my story and my work. Obviously, if Austen had written that, she would have said admirer, because the word fan did not exist until earliest recorded, I think, is 1889. So she uses modern language, and we're supposed to believe that this is from a setting 200 years ago, and it just no, it just fails to convince me in every possible way. The author is supposed to be a Jane Austen scholar. I haven't looked into that properly, but I have to say that I think that when she says scholar, she means that she's read a lot of books about Jane Austen. And personally, I don't feel that that is what it takes for someone to call themselves a scholar on a topic. And I don't think that she's necessarily done the kind of research that would qualify for actually somebody being a scholar of a topic, I gotta say, I doubt it. She certainly has not done anywhere near enough research into the language of the period, which is very difficult to recreate. The punctuation, for instance, was very different from our English, present-day English, and hardly anyone ever manages to recreate that. But these things aside, I'm making the book sound really bad now, and it isn't really all that bad. I think the characters are pretty good. Their reactions and emotions are pretty convincing. There are some quotes from actual letters written by Austen. A poem that she wrote to her brother is quoted. And I do believe in the characters, definitely, and the story is pretty charming. It's in a period that inspired supposedly Austen to rewrite her novel Sense and Sensibility. That was eventually the first novel that she had published. And the author is relatively clever in recreating Austen's life so that the inspiration for Sensibility as it is becomes really obvious and, for my money, pretty convincing. But again, it's the language that falls short completely, and that makes it almost even worse, because I think this book could have been a much, much better read if it had been actually, if the author had managed to actually write in a journal style, because I have to say, it can be done. If you're interested, you should read The Ginger Tree by Oswald Wynd, is it? Anyway, The Ginger Tree is the title of the novel. It was made into a TV series a number of years ago by the same name. And that is a book that is written entirely in letters and journal entries, and it is 100% convincing. So anyone who wants to see how it should be done should read that book, which unfortunately Syrie James, I'm sure, would have benefited from tremendously, because this is a relatively clever idea. And she's not without talent, and it's an entertaining book worth reading if you're a fan, but it completely fails to deliver on its central premise, unfortunately. So I cannot say that this is a book that actually works in what it's supposed to be. So I'm not going to be able to rate this very highly, but definitely it's pretty funny. It's moving in parts. It has good characters and an intriguing plot, and I definitely recommend it to any Austen fans. But be prepared that, at least if you're as picky as I am, you're going to be disappointed in a couple of major ways, unfortunately. But read it for yourself. I'll make more videos about Jane Austen's sequels in the future, so keep an eye out for that, because there actually is quite a lot of really, really good books that have been written as sequels to Pride and Prejudice or other Austen books. And unfortunately, among the many spin-offs, this is nowhere near the top of the pile.